Good afternoon, my dear friends. Let me start before you a class on Macaulay's minutes of 1835. Before talking about Macaulay's minutes, we have to look at the background on which Macaulay submitted his report in 1835. Though Britishers were there, had been there since 17th century, they never intended to give education to Indians until they became the rulers in India. Britishers have come to India just for trade and business. They never intended to rule our country. But circumstances encouraged them to capture power in India. They came to understand that they could capture the power easily because the kings and emperors were fighting with each other in India. At the beginning, they started giving trained army people to different kings on rent. Gradually, they started fighting with the kings and capturing different areas. And in 1757, after the War of Plassey, they captured India. They became the rulers. At this time, they realized that they were badly in need of workers because their ruling system was something modern. So they needed lots of clerks and office bearers. It was not possible during those times to recruit officers and clerks from England. So they started thinking about giving education to Indians. And in 1813, they published the first Charter Act, in which they recommended ₹1 lakh for the empowerment of education, or for organizing or for encouraging educational activities in India. This ₹1 lakh was given to indigenous educational systems which were prevailing in India during those times. In 1817, they published a second Charter Act in which they recommended ₹2 lakh, or they increased the amount from ₹1 lakh to ₹2 lakh for educational institutions. And during this time, a controversy emerged. The controversy was called Oriental Occidental controversy. Some people started arguing that Indians should be given education in their regional languages such as Sanskrit, Arabic, Urdu. And they also argued that Indians should be taught Indian culture or Eastern culture, Oriental culture, and Oriental literature. On the other, these people were known as Orientalists. On the other hand, some other people argued that Indians should be given education in English language, and European literature and culture should be cultivated or taught in the institutions. And they were called Occidentalists. And this controversy emerged. So it was something which was preventing the development in the field of education, because Britishers had just started giving education in India. At the very beginning, such a controversy emerged. So the educational system was struggling. Meanwhile, actually, Britishers had decided to review the Charter Act, which had been published in 1813. After 20 years. So in 1833, actually they had to review the Charter Act, and Oriental Occidental controversy had been there as well. So William Bentinck, the then Governor General of Britishers, assigned Mr. Macaulay, Lord Macaulay, a council member, a member of the Governor General's Council, to study about the existing educational system in India and to submit a report so that to solve the problem called Oriental-Occidental controversy and to develop the educational system in India. In 1835, he submitted his report, the so-called Macaulay's Mills. In the report, the first recommendation was that education should be given to Indians in English language. He presented different arguments for this recommendation. He told that English was the language of the ruling class. So citizens, people should be taught the language of the ruling class. And another argument he presented was that Indians were eager to learn English language. So he promoted English language as the medium of instruction in his first recommendation. The second recommendation was that European literature should be taught to Indians, and European culture should be promoted by educational activities, two educational activities. Again, he argued that the whole Oriental literature or the Eastern literature would worth a single shelf in a library in Great Britain. Actually, it was an insulting statement. And he also told that European culture should be cultivated in Indians. Actually, he stated, and these words uttered by Macaulay is so infamous in our history. He told that his aim was to create Britishers, some people who were Europeans in the case of vision, the case of culture and thoughts, and Indians in the case of blood and peripheral appearance. So he was telling that his intention was to create Indians in color and blood, but Britishers or Europeans in culture and attitude. And his third recommendation was downward filtration theory. He thought that there was no need for mass education. It was impossible to give mass education in India. elite people could be given education. And there is a tendency that the lower class people would always imitate elite people or the upper class people. So once you start giving education to the elite people, it will be filtered down to the lower class people, because lower class people would be imitating the elite people according to Macaulay. So he thought that there was no need for giving education to all the people. And another recommendation was to stop the financial aid of 2 lakh rupees to indigenous educational systems. I mean, the traditional educational systems. He thought that instead of giving such a financial aid to indigenous educational systems, so the traditional educational systems, such amounts could be spent for the propagation, for the promotion of English education. If you look at the different aspects of Macaulay's ministry, it was something like adding more fuel into the burning fire. Actually, he had been assigned the duty of solving the Oriental Occidental controversy, but he was adding more fuel to the burning fire, because he stood with a group and he was insulting the Orientalists. His statements, such as the whole Eastern literature would worth only a single shelf in a library in Europe, and his real intention was to create Indians in blood and color, but Britishers or Europeans in culture and attitude. And another insulting sentence he made was that English is the language of the ruling class. So the ruled ones, the citizens, should learn the language of ruling class. And his downward filtration theory too was a failure. Actually, he was a cunning man. Actually, he was a scholar. What he told about the nature of the lower class people was true. It was a correct hypothesis. All of us know that lower class people always tend to imitate upper class people. But the matter was that upper class people were not ready to provide what they got in the shape of modern education to the lower class people. So this downward filtration theory was also a failure. So this Macaulay's minute is something infamous for lots of Indians, because a person who had come for solving a controversy was adding more fuel to the burning fire, and he was not able to solve the problems which were there in the field of education in India during those times. Thank you. Thank you.